Welcome to our Shiur Tanakh, Parshat Shavua, Vayigash, one of the more famous chapters of the book of Yechezkel, in chapter 37, if you can find it in your Tanakh, Sefer Yechezkel, chapter 37. Some of you that have studied Yechezkel more than others know when you glance and contemplate about the Sefer of Yechezkel, you know that first God prophesies to him in Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because the Shekhinah doesn't really reside, the Divine Presence does not reside on a prophet in Chutz La'aretz.
I'll show you.
But what happens? Thereafter, already off of the Babylon rivers, Yechezkel gets further prophecies. And Chazal asked that question, how does it happen? And Chazal, our sages, do say that since the Divine Presence began on Yechezkel in the land of Israel, therefore it continued even to him outside the land of Israel. There's a lot of reward and punishment mentioned in the Sefer, but perhaps one of the most popular prophecies of Yechezkel that's well known, maybe because we also read it on I think it's Shabbat Chol HaMoed of Sukkot. We read also about this chazon, the vision of the atzamot yeveshot, the dry bones. First, let's remember and ask the famous question, why is it doing here? Why are we learning about Yechezkel and the dry bones, or the revival of the dry bones? Well, we know that in our Parsha, the children of Yaakov came together. They even bowed down to them. There's a lot of grudges or lack of love. And we see coming forth a great individual, Yehuda. Yehuda comes and faces Yosef. And on a deeper level, it's not just two brothers facing one another, and the demand of Yehuda on behalf of his youngest brother called Binyamin. But rather, we're having two giants here, two upcoming kings of Israel. Rabbi Gon spoke about it. I'm sure Rabbi Yehuda Cohen also spoke about it. We have the Mashiach ben Yosef and the Mashiach ben David. And let us learn and contemplate what is the message of the prophet. Is it applicable to us? Has this matter happened or is happening? Is it a one-time affair or is it a process? So from verse 15 and on, in this chapter, really to best understand it, we have to understand the former chapter, that is the truth. So let's glance about chapter 36. And here we see the disgrace mentioned by the prophet in the name of God. And this disgrace is culminating when people are saying, hey, what are these Jewish people doing here? Why have they been taken out of their land? Okay, and it's clearly what we call a desecration of God's name, as you see in chapter 36, verse 20. I'm talking about Vayavo el hagoyim. We're going to come into the nations, asher ba'u sham, vayichalelu et shem kodshe, and they're going to desecrate the name, my holy name. Why? Be'emor lehem, the nations are going to be talking about the Jewish people, and they're going to say, we see it in verse 20, Am Hashem Eileh, this is the nation of God. Umi artzel yatzan, they came out of their land. Okay. So when God sees that the Jewish people are not waking up, but the nations of the world are saying, hey Jews, what are you doing here, man? Then time will come that God will have what? Rachamim. Ve'echmol Hashem kodshi. God will have mercy. Do you see that in verse 21 of chapter 36, the chapter before? Asher chilu beit Yisrael b'goyim asher ba'u shama. Okay. You can even count the number of times the verb chilaltem is mentioned here. I think I counted and I saw it mentioned at least 3 times, if not more. What's God going to do? He's going to bring us back to the land of Israel. That brings us to chapter 37. And here we must read the psukim before our Haftarah in verse 3. Vayomer Eli, the prophet says, Ben Adam, a person says to me, Atichyena atzamot ha'ela? He's looking at the bones. Now, I want to mention something. When we read a prophecy that has a metaphor, okay, and in the metaphor there is an action, a symbolic action, it makes the prophecy even stronger. Here, they're looking at bones. Who are the bones? Representing the nation of Israel. And where are these bones? If we see verse 4, Vayomer Eli, he says to me, Hinave, prophesies. God says, Alatzamot ha'ila. Vamartalim, you're going to say to them, Hatzamot ha'yeveshot, the dry bones. Shemu Dvar Hashem. Now, who are dry bones? Who are dry bones? With all due respect to the Chabad community in Hong Kong and the great rabbi and the fellow Jews living there are fine people, and with all due respect to the Central Synagogue in Rome, but our friends know that we, the Jewish people, when we are in the Galut, we are similar to dry bones. Hatzamot hayaveshot. Now, I don't know if any of you have worked in a laboratory in your pre-med schooling, and you're dealing with biopsies, and you're dealing with dissecting animals, and you get a bunch of dry bones. And some of you say, well, what's the difference between a dry bone and a moist bone? That's not the point. The point is, to the utmost understanding, if we just think about it, there's no vitality. There's no movement. There's no functioning when we're likened to a dry bones. The famous Vilna Gaon says, and he's living in Vilna, says we are likened to a bunch of dry bones. Now, if you had a choice, let me ask this gentleman over here. You have tissue? No, you have tissue. You have skin, tissue, cartilage.
On which leg?
But play with me, please. Answer?
Yes.
There you go. You have cartilage, you have tissue, you have a blood system working, you have joints in various parts of your body. Oxygen is flowing right now? Your heart is pumping? Well, you look like a healthy person. You have a lovely complexion. Your color is wonderful. Are you
I'm white.
You're Ashkenazi, there's no doubt. In any event, bones, being only bones, without tissue, without cartilage, without skin, without blood and oxidation moving in your body. Imagine, you're looking, contemplating, can something happen to these dry bones? It looks like the most lack of life situation. But God says, okay, in verse 5, I'm still speaking about the prophecy here, prior to the Haftarah, in verse 5, Ko Amar Hashem Elokim, Latzamot Eila. Latzamot Eila, meaning in regards to these dry bones. Hine ani mevi vachem ruach v'chitem. My dear friends, when we read the chapter before, we talked about ruach. We talked about a resurrection. We talked about the people of Israel that have desecrated the name of God by living in Chutz La'aretz, that they can't go on. God's going to take them and bring them from the nations. It says, I will gather you. If you read verse 24 of the last chapter, I'm going to bring you to the land, and then I'm going to sprinkle on you, not sprinkles for your ice cream cone, but I'm going to sprinkle on you mayim tehorim, pure waters. And what will be the effect, the result of the pure waters that God is sprinkling on us? You're going to purify yourself. Here too, God talked about a new heart. God talked about a new spirit. God talked about the removal of stone from your flesh and giving instead a new heart. Okay? So, and God says, I'm going to give you a new ruach. When we read and learn and contemplate about this last prophecy of the chapter before the Haftarah, wow, what are we learning about? That there could be a call from the soul. It's coming from God. The Zionist dream. Even by people without wearing a kippah, and without doing keeping Shabbat and eating kosher. There's a call by God. That's the ruach that starts. And then people start coming and continue to come. And over this century and that century, and they start tilling the land and cultivating the land and building industry and agriculture and farming and cities and suburbs. And the building of the land, that is the Mashiach ben Yosef. That is the part of the redemption that's related to the material, the fiscal, the financial, the building of the country. Wow. We can ask ourselves, is this relevant to us? Wow, it's so relevant. Are we in a dream? Yours truly, the guy sitting here, I had the merit of going to 2 weddings last night and a Shiva call, a morning call to the house of the I shared this with you? I told you?
All in one time, 2 Shiva calls.
No, 1 Shiva call and 2 weddings. There's something called a car. And I found that there are highways in the land of Israel. And I went from eastern Yerushalayim, almost to the coast of Ashkelon. And I went to these places. And I even went into the settlement called Merkaz Shapira, to Rabbi Druckman's house, where the police set up this gigantic tent for the mourners. Kenny has 10 children and a wife. And I arrived there at a time you would probably not pay a consolation call. I went at 10:30 at night. The gigantic structure that the police set up for the family is about 5 times the length of this room. No, 7, 8 times the length of this room. And 4 or 5 times the width of this room. And I arrived at 10:30. You don't believe me probably. And there were hundreds of people there.
10:30, you said.
At night.
Oh.
How did they get there? Buses, cars, transit. The infrastructure of the country is there. Because Rabbi Druckman was such a great gadol, he made an impact on so many people. Okay? And there's so unbelievable stories about the rabbi. My wife was there for 6 or 7 hours yesterday because she knows the daughters of them. 6, 7 hours. And she says, Menachem, she got home like at 7, 8 in the evening. She said, I could have spent 3 days there to hear the stories of this great rabbi, that they were neighbors. Okay? I went there only for 20, 25 minutes. I spoke to one son-in-law. I consoled a son, one of the daughters. And I was looking around. Teachers, educators, students, boys and girls that have been impacted and affected, and they're coming day and night. Thousands are coming during a day. The chief rabbi was there, Sephardi rabbi, chief Ashkenazi rabbi. He made an impact. But he is part of this messianic part of the Mashiach ben Yosef and also the Mashiach ben David. He is inspiring, educating. Rabbi Druckman has been teaching, establishing the yeshiva world. And he's bringing unity. And that leads us to the actual words of the prophet. Let's skip now to the actual beginning. And remember, in our Parsha, the brothers get together. They get together, but you remember what the brothers' reaction? They're frightened. They're frightened when Yosef reveals himself. So they're together, but maybe in the back of their mind, are they suspicious? God forbid he might do something to them. And when we read in the next parsha who passes away, and the end of the book of Bereshit, who passes away? But when Yaakov passes away, there's a little fright. There's fright. There's fright. So the unity there maybe is like an external type of unity. Here, let's read about a greater unity that's going to happen in the future for the Jewish people in general, and the leadership in particular. And therefore the prophet says in verse 16, V'ata ben Adam, when Yechezkel gets many prophecies in the language of Ben Adam, Kach lecha eitz echad. Take a piece of wood. Some call it a piece of wood, or we might see it as a plank of wood, and maybe we might see later in the explanation that it's a tree. Uchtov alav, I want you to write, inscribe on the wood, the plank, or the tree, Liuda, and also V'livnei Yisrael Chaviro, Judah and Israel. Ulekach eitzecha, take another one. Uchtov alav, write on it, Liosef, representing Eitz Ephraim, V'chol Beit Yisrael Chavirav. What's the purpose of these? V'karevotam, bring them closer together. Echad el echad, one on the other. Lecha, for you. Le'etz echad, make it into one plank, one piece of wood, or shall we say, into one tree as well. Share an interesting understanding of Rabbi Elchanan Samet. Vayu lachadim biyadecha. On the one hand, you can have these two in your hand, but they're going to be like one. V'chasher yomru elecha. When we're reading this metaphor, this actuality in a metaphor, and you're doing something, and it's a very strong prophecy. B'nei amcha, the children of your nation, Lemor saying, Halot tagid lanu ma'il, what's the purpose? Come on, man, what's going on with this metaphor of taking two planks or two pieces of wood or two trees and making them one? What's going on? Daber aleihim, speaking to them. Give the answer to Am Yisrael. Be the voice, be the microphone. Ko amar Hashem Elokim. These are the words of God the Lord. Hineni lokechet eitz Yosef asher biyad Ephraim. Remember, Ephraim was like the leading tribe for the kingdom of the Ephraim kingdom when we were divided after Shlomo Melech's time for hundreds of years. But this is going to be after the destruction of the second temple. Yechezkel is prophesying for after the time of the destruction of the second temple. V'shiftei Yisrael chavirav v'natati otam alav et eitz Yehuda v'asitem la'eitz echad. You're going to turn this one onto the other. Vayu echad biyadin, and then two makes one. What? Two trees, two planks? Vayu eitzim asher tichtov alechem biyadcha le'enehem. Now look, we're talking about trees, or if we say it's trees, then there's growth. If we're taking just planks, boards of wood, then it's something very symbolic. But maybe, I'm going to share in a moment the explanation that we're talking here about grafting. I only saw that amongst some of the Achronim, the later commentators. What happens when you do grafting? You take two different trees, you tie that together into two branches, one on top of the other, and then as it cultivates, it yields, after a year or 2 or 3 years, it turns into one. Okay, that's how agronomists or scientists in agriculture produce certain types of tangerines and apples and plums, and where they do grafting, what? Nectarines, which is what? The cut between a plum and a peach. Okay? A forsake and a...
You're allowed to do that? That's okay.
Okay. You're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to eat it. The problem is the grafting itself. V'daber aleihem, speak unto them. What does this mean? Verse 21. Ko amar Hashem Elokim. Hineni lokechet b'nei Yisrael miben hagoyim. Right? The previous chapter was talking about the Mashiach ben Yosef. Kibbutz galuyot. The Jews arriving, 001 arriving from Gibraltar, 002 arriving from New York, 003 arriving from Roma, 004 arriving from Buchenwald, no, not Buchenwald, God forbid, from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, from Port Washington, 005 arriving from Los Angeles, from Hong Kong, 007 arriving from Akron, Ohio, Cincinnati. And the Jews are coming, and they're building the land. Will they be together? Yemenites, Moroccans, Jews from Russia, Jews from the Czech Republic, Jews from Italy, Jews from Northern Africa, and so on and so forth. We got a balagan. Can it be come together? Here, what is the purpose? Here's the purpose of verse 21. I'm taking the children of Israel from the nations. And what are they going to turn into in verse 22? Here it is. Vasiti otam legoy echad ba'aretz. One nation. Now, Thomas, do you see the hat that Yisrael's wearing?
Yeah.
I don't like it. I want to tell you the truth. I don't like his hat. But you know what? I respect him. Why? I'm not going to tell you. I prefer different types of hats and colors. But you know what? To each their own. I respect him. We're going to be united. He's different. You're right. Not everyone. I don't have to dress like Mr. Shua Myron dresses. He has these fancy three-piece vests, and he has these cowboy hats and his cowboy shoes once in a while. I don't, it's not my cup of tea. However, are we going to respect him and honor him? Unity is not what? That we think alike, and that we dress alike, and that we wear the standards. No, you be you. I want you to be you. You're not Rabbi Akiva, and I'm not Rabbi Yossi. You're going to be Thomas, I'm going to be Menachem. We have to be ourselves. And the more we respect one another and understand your qualities and your talents and your abilities, wow. The greater unity is the collection of all these resources, all these talents, living together, respecting for one objective, to be Am Echad Ba'aretz, in this land. Do you remember this? The usage of Goy Echad Ba'aretz, where it appears in a prayer service? Where does it appear? Where? I don't think so. The word Goy Echad Ba'aretz in verse 22. I don't think so.
I say something.
Not in. I don't believe in Tachna. On Shabbat, right? No, not in Shacharit. Close. Keep on going. The term Goy Echad Ba'aretz, one nation in the land, is a phrase in the Mincha service of Shabbos, right? Remember, the blessings of the Shabbat Amidah are 7 blessings. The opening 3, like in every one, the ending 3, and 1 middle blessing, that's all. As opposed to the Shemona Esrei, the 18 or 19 that we have, right? The middle blessing is respectively for Shabbat night, Shabbat morning, and Mincha of Shabbat. The theme, that God sanctifies the Shabbat. Baruch, how does it end? Baruch atah Hashem, Mekadesh Shabbat. That's the ending blessing of the evening service of Shabbat, as the Shacharit and the Mincha. The opening of the Mincha service, of that middle blessing, is Ata Echad, you're one. Vishimcha Echad, and your name is one. And then rhetorically asking, Umi ke'amcha Yisrael, who is like your nation Israel? And the answer is Goy Echad Ba'aretz. A Goy is a specific culture with a specific tongue and way of life. That's what a Goy really means. A nation that has a designed culture, objective language. The nation of Israel is Goy Echad. Where the Zohar says, don't know when I teach you Zohar. Where does the Zohar say you're Goy Echad? Ba'aretz. That's what it states here, and that's what the phrase is appearing in the Mincha service. So the purpose, in other words, Mashiach ben Yosef is God appearing through visionaries, people that have visions, historians, people that are explaining the process of human history here, and seeing how the Jewish people over the last few hundreds of years are going through a very small, slow process of coming back to the land of Israel. Kibbutz Galiyot, and building the land with all the difficulties involved. And then we talked about that has to be a purpose. For what are we coming back? We're coming back for a high ideal. Goy Echad Ba'aretz. Here we're unified. Here we have the ability to be unified. Certainly there are today in modern day times, there are leftists and centrists and right-wingers and all this stuff. But the fact that this gentleman, is in favor of socialism, and you in favor of communism, and he is in favor of capitalism, I didn't ask what your opinion. That we can respect you. There's socialism in the Torah. There's some communism, there's some capitalism. Everything you can find in the Torah. We have to decide as a democratic Jewish nation in the land what is best for us and respect that decision. And then there's more unity and respect. Okay? Sometimes we don't see it if we don't listen to the right news station or radio station where we hear people. I don't want to talk about that right now. Okay? So the purpose of the kibbutz galiyot is goy echad ba'aretz. Umelech echad yelechulam lemelech. We're going to have one king in the future. One leader. For the hundreds of years when it was divided, it was two kingdoms. The house of Judah, the house of David, and the house of Ephraim. V'lo you od l'shnei goyim. We're not going to further be like two nations. V'lo yechatzu od l'shtei mamlechot, nor be two kingdoms further. When we're two kingdoms, when we're divided, it's a desecration of God's name. Do you understand why it's a desecration of God's name? Because God is one. And He created us to be His unique nation. So we have to be one. We have the properties inside ourselves to reveal to be united. What does united mean? Again, it doesn't mean that you and I think alike, that you and I dress alike, that you and I wear the same kippah, or Bichlal even wear a kippah. Doesn't mean it whatsoever. It means that I respect you and that let's work together on behalf of the nation. Where do you see ultimate unity often? In the army. Everyone wears the same green uniform, the same army shoes, and goes out to defend the Jewish people. Even though he's from the kibbutz, you're the capitalistic guy from Midtown Azriel buildings in downtown Tel Aviv. You're from the Diamond Center, and you're a farmer, and you're an intellectualist, and we're all coming together going into the army. That's the really utmost unity. But there we're forced to wear the same clothing. It's to a bit of forced unity, but it's to represent a one matter. God promises here in verse 23, Velo yitamuod, we're not going to pollute anymore. You know, our actions, our culture that we adopted from the nations of the world in Chutz La'aretz, Uvechol Pishim, and all the crimes we're dealing. Voshati otam, God says, I'm going to save you from that. Mikol moshvotem asher chatuvem. V'tiarti otam. You're going to be purified. Vayuli la'am v'ani ayelem lokim. There's going to be a lovely, divine union. We're going to be one to God, and God will be one to us. V'avdi David, and now the future, the Melech HaMashiach, the Messiah, the anointed king that will come from the seed of David. And this is the parallel of Yehudah and Yosef becoming one in the reading of the Torah, but here it'll be even higher, a higher unity, because there will not be two leaders. Ve'avdi David in verse 24, Melech Alehem, right? In the end, there'll be Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, but there's going to be one kingdom, and that'll be David's kingdom, coming from the tribe of Yehudah. That's what it was meant to be. He was given the title, the talent, the traits that are required to be ruling. V'roeh echad yeluchulam, one shepherd. Uvemishpatai yeluchu. When we're going to be one, we're going to be going according to the laws of God. V'chukotai yishmeru. Right? We have statutes of the Torah that have no reason, intellectual understanding behind them, that they are considered a chok. V'asuotam. What are we going to do it? Pasuk 25, V'yashua la'aretz asher natati lavdi Yaakov. They're going to dwell in the land that I gave to my servant Yaakov, who is mentioned in our Parsha. Asher yashvu ba'avotechem. This is the biblical land, the land of our ancestors in verse 28. V'yashvu alehem uvneihem, their children, uvnei v'neim, their grandchildren, ad olam. So maybe we can understand from here that the third commonwealth, the third coming of the Jewish people to the land of Israel will be eternal. There will not be an exile thereafter. There's no young, right? There's an expression, you can't stop the song. The song, it's a Shirah Chadashah. We have a new song, the song of redemption. The Jewish people are coming back to live. Or what do you want to say?
How will I have Shalom Bayit then?
Why not?
If we're both in the same land.
We're both in the same what?
Land.
It has to be Shalom Bayit. Okay, it has to be Shalom Bayit. V'David avdi nasi lehem le'olam. So these are very encouraging words about what is happening here. So, my dear friends, we see here that in this Haftarah, Yehudah and Yosef are coming to be united. And when Yudah and Yosef are united in the Parsha, and here they're united even on a higher level, well, if these two are united, that means subsequently all the other tribes should be united. Why? Because Yudah and Yosef are leaders. If the leaders are united, the nation behind them will be united, as we see here. And that's an interesting understanding when we see that two planks or two trees turn into one. And I read an article by Rav Samit, one of the special Tanakh teachers here, and he holds, like I mentioned briefly before, that the parallel is not a perfect parallel to the Parsha, because in the Parsha, there still could be division. Oh, now Yosef is alive, now we see him, but they're afraid of him. So the achdut, the unity in the Parsha between the sons may not be so perfect, because the sons may be really, the brothers are afraid of Yosef. They don't know what they're going to do. Now they have to be together for what purpose? They have to survive. They're going to be down in Mitzrayim for hundreds of years. And that's a survival battle, the battle of survival. Okay? We have no choice but to be united in Mitzrayim to survive. Okay? There is a teal, a famous teal in the yeshiva high school my youngest son is in. It's called a survival teal. They go like 2-3 days. The ones in charge give the students a certain amount of food and food only and a certain amount of water.
It's high school, right?
Yeah. And they say, you dig up whatever you want to dig up, you make yourself a place to sleep outside, and you survive with this amount of water and food over the next 2 or 3 days. And they have to know to, what is it called? How to allocate, what is the word? Ration, thank you. The amount of food and water, and survive. And it's a tough trip for them to be outdoors for these 3 days and survive, but they have no choice. This is the situation now with Yosef and the brothers. They have to be united, but for the purpose of surviving, not for the purpose of flowering, of blossoming, of turning into a nation. We're going to turn into a nation from a populist point of view. But the difference between the Parsha and here is that in the Parsha, the unity is to survive. But here, what we're learning, it's not to survive, it's to become one nation. Okay? I just came from a Beit Din 2 hours ago. I was delayed there a long time. Okay? Amos and his wife. If you know Amos from the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
So I just went to his Beit Din. And the Dayan asks him, what purpose is it that God chose the Jewish people? Do they have a purpose? So his wife answered, litaken olam, to fix the world. And the rabbi asked him, what do you mean to fix the world? To use screwdrivers and plumbing, what for what? But we know it's to bring the light. Bring goodness. We're going to represent goodness by your speech, by your behavior, what you do, what you don't do, how we act as a nation to ourselves, to the nations. We're going to show the world that it's good to say the truth and not to lie. We're going to show the world that it's good not to be violent, but to be polite and to be peaceful. We're going to show the world that we can use monies, investments, to support welfare cases. There's so many poor families that have to be supported that they don't have the ability. There's so many, okay, and I think they released statistics today, if I'm not mistaken, and they talk that double the amount of poverty appears in Haredi families and Arab families. I'm talking about the state of Israel, Arab citizens, okay? Okay? Well, these are our brothers, not the Arabs. The Jews are our brothers. We have to help them out. So we need a department of welfare.
The Druze or Jews?
The Jews. Thank you for... you're making fun of my accent, probably. No, well, that's okay. No, I'm just joking.
That was by mistake.
That's okay. My friends, there's a lot of writing about, you say to Ilu Nishmat Chaya Bat Shaul. There you go. There's a lot to talk about, which is going to mention shortly, that when there are prophecies that bring these symbolic acts, like taking 2 planks or 2 trees and making them together, it shows that this moral lesson is upcoming. Often, We don't get a lot of these symbolic actions and prophecies, okay? But the koach, the power of an action, of a symbolic act, is sometimes you don't have to talk, like you show words, and they come together. Here, we're likened to trees. Trees are something which is growing, vegetating, blossoming, providing shade, which is shelter. Okay, the Jewish people are blossoming, flowering, bringing fruit. Okay, when I go to a chatan and kala, I often say to them, like I did last night, okay, may you see, B'ezrat Hashem, a lot of sweet fruits. What do I mean? See beautiful children. Okay, that's the purpose of marriage. Chatan and kala, to get married in order to bring children into the world. So this symbol of two eitzim, which could mean two trees grafting together, are going to bring a very special fruit. The fruit of these two trees, of Ephraim and Yehuda, of Yosef and Yehuda. So the koach of the symbolic act is special, is that you don't have to talk too many words. You can study about two trees coming together, and they're going to be producing something, not like the brothers going down to Mitzrayim to survive, okay? And their survival is, or their unity is something, how shall we say? Temporary. Temporary. Because what's going to happen after a few decades? We're going to get to the book of Shemot. What's going to happen? Oh, we're going to be under the affliction of Paro, and we're going to be learning that we're going to be turning into a bunch of national slaves. Galut, deep galut. So much that we've reached the deepest levels of assimilation. Okay? What happened in Egypt over the course of the 210 years? Wow. We were better Egyptians than Egyptians, right? With all our assimilation. We were really going bad. So the ichud, the unity that's happening now in our Parshiot, number one, is in Chutz La'aretz, Mitzrayim. Number two, Rav Samet writes, is a temporary unity, and is climaxed with what? That we're a bunch of slaves in the Galut. Okay? And who's leading the show? In our Parshiot? Who's going to lead? Which leader? Yosef. Whereas in our Haftarah, we see a classic difference. Where is the place of the unity? In the land of Israel. And is this unity going to be temporary? It's not going to be temporary. It's going to be lanetzach, forever. Okay? Le'olam, as we read in the Psukim. And who will be the leader? The two trees are going to come together, but who's going to be on top? Yudah. So we see here, there's not division, there's going to be really unity here. And we don't know what's happening now, but I think we're living in this era where we've gone through, of course, difficult times. Okay? It's now been how many years that outsiders are not attacking us anymore? What was the last war? Yom Kippur was the last war?
That's not the last. Huh? I thought the Lebanon attacked in 2000.
Right. So we have the Lebanon, right. We have Milchemet Shlomo Galil, and that was in the 80s, right?
82?
Okay, yeah. So we're talking about in 02.
Right?
So we're talking about 40 years. Why haven't 22 Arab states attacked the Jewish people? It's exactly what we saw. We went on the trip, right? And don't mention Dimona. You saw what I saw? You didn't say anything. I thought so. You don't know what we have in Dimona, do you?
Oh.
Everybody
knows about
Don't say.
Oh, I know, desert monkeys.
Desert
I
monkey.
love them. I used to see them climbing up these trees like there wasn't leaves and there was.
So that's apparently, that's called harta'ah. What do we call that in English when the enemies are fearful of attacking us? What is it called in English?
Oh, harta'ah.
What is it called?
Intimidation.
Intimidation is a different word.
Peace through strength.
No. Deterrent.
Deterrent, thank you.
Deterrent.
Thank you.
Deterrence.
Israel, the state of Israel today is very strong, thank God, economically and militarily. And that provides us a deterrent in front of our enemies, that they don't want to attack us. Because God forbid if they attack us, they're in trouble. We don't have anywhere else to go. They would want us into the Mediterranean, but we have nowhere else to go. And therefore, we're getting stronger and stronger. We're providing ourselves with military strength, economic strength. Okay? The Aliyah numbers are growing from year to year. And now the nation has made a decision that we're a little sick and tired of the lack of nationhood, and we're sick and tired of the lack of respect to the tradition of the Jewish people. And therefore the Jewish vote, not the state vote, the Jewish vote in the last election was 2/3 as opposed to 1/3. 2/3 in favor of nationalism, in favor of Judaism, tradition, to give respect, more respect to the tradition and the people that are maintaining the tradition, as opposed to 1/3 that says, no, we want more leftist. Let's be a nation like any other nation. Let's be a state like any other state. We don't need Judaism so much. Yeah, you could do it, but privately, nationally, it's not important. But the nation said, that means the nation is the Jewish vote for nationhood and tradition is double than what it was. And you don't have to be with a PhD in social study and investigation. What's going to be happening next 10 or 20 years? What's going to grow even more?
The Jewish people, the Jewish population.
The population that's related to nationhood and Torah, tradition of Israel, is going to grow and grow. You know what their families are, whereas opposed to the people that have not yet seen the light, they have smaller families, and we see this also in the army. We see in the army a tremendous number of national religious Jews that are officers in the army. Double or triple the number of their representation in the population. Okay? If the national religious population is this, of the entire pie of the population of going into the army, the number of the captains and officers are twice or three times the number of what they represent. Why? Because the education. We're educating for idealism. We're educating to give on behalf and help build the nation. So we're now in the process of values, of contributing and building our nation. And a person that contributes and builds, he doesn't say, what's lacking in me? He says, I'm missing, the more I give, I'm lacking. No. The more I build, the more I contribute, the more I do, I'm getting impacted. My friends and neighbors in the community are getting impacted. So you're getting stronger. You're giving your time, your resources, your energy on behalf of national values. Fantastic. That's the idealism that that's what God is talking about in the Torah. And that's what we're seeing here. So I think the key words in this Haftarah are the Eitzim, which could be two trees that are grafted together by some commentaries that explain it. And we turn into one, but we have a leader, David. We don't have yet Mashiach ben David in his appearance, but there's no doubt that the more Torah education that we have, and showing really how good Torah is. Right now there's a small clique of our brothers that are running the Department of Communications, that are running key offices, and their voice is very big. It sounds like a big shofar. But we have to know how to filter these things out and realize that our dear brothers in the left are getting smaller and smaller in size. They did tremendous building of the country before the coming of the state and right after the coming of the state, of building this country and fighting, and presidents and prime ministers and high-ranking officers. They did so much great work. But right now they have a crisis situation. What values do they have? What, to be a state like any other state in the world? Let's bring in Gentiles and give them citizenship and values of pluralism? That's not the Jewish people. That's not who we are. We have to be strong in our identity and showing who we are, not forcing anyone to be like me. Don't misunderstand me. No religious coercion whatsoever. Okay? But to talk about all this pluralism that's coming from the United States, which is crumbling right now as far as values is concerned, that's not us. That's not the real makeup of the Jewish people. And we don't have to be embarrassed to say that's not us. We have every right to say that's not us. all these ideas. Then we're in a process of finding ourselves, who we are. And it's natural, because after 2,000 years, you're rusty. Not living here in your land and doing the Torah, but doing it in Chutz La'aretz is fake.
After 14 years, we're rusty. Wow.
Okay, so thank God, we're happy that we're reflecting upon the words of Yechezkel, that it's affecting us, that we're now in the process of this, and what we have to do is be partners with El, with God, by learning who we are, by understanding who we are and how great it is, and then it'll give us greater power, greater energy, greater understanding. B'ezrat Hashem, Ken Yiratzon.